At 72 years old, Eleanor Mayfield didn't walk into a room. She glided into it, glowing with the kind of confidence people half her age spent money trying to imitate. Palm Beach locals were used to seeing wealthy retirees with perfect tans and quiet routines. But Eleanor was different. She had a spark that refused to dim. Her silver hair, always curled just right, framed a face that still carried the softness of a woman who once loved deeply and laughed easily. Her nails were always done, her workout leggings always matched, and every morning she walked in a prime form gym like it was her second home. And yet, no one really understood why she pushed herself so hard. They only saw the surface, her 5-mile beach runs, her ability to hold a plank longer than girls in their 20s, the way trainers whispered, "There she is," when she walked by. But behind the carefully chosen outfits and the bright smile lived a woman who'd been quietly fighting loneliness for years. When her husband, Dr. Richard Mayfield, passed away from sudden stroke in 2018, friends expected Eleanor to fold into grief like so many widows do. Richard had been her anchor, her partner, the person who made even silence feel full. They were together nearly 40 years. His death left her with a house too big, nights too long, and a bed that never felt warm again. But Eleanor didn't collapse. She did the opposite. She donated $500,000 to the local animal shelter, sold the old home filled with memories that hurt too much, and bought a new place by the water, a stunning whitestone villa overlooking the Atlantic. To the world, it looked like she was thriving. But no one saw the truth. No one heard how quiet the house became when the sun went down, or how often she walked into a room and forgot why she'd gone there, distracted by a sudden wave of missing the man who used to stand beside her. She filled that silence with movement. Classes at the gym, brunches with acquaintances, volunteer shifts at the hospital. Anything to keep from sitting still too long, because sitting still meant remembering that she was growing old alone. Her only real family was her granddaughter, Olivia, a 27-year-old junior attorney, grinding her way through New York's courtrooms. They FaceTimed every week, laughing about cases, clothes, and the chaos of the city. Olivia always promised to visit after this big trial, but those visits rarely happened. Eleanor never complained. She told herself that distance was part of motherhood, part of letting younger generations build their own lives. Still, every time she hung up the phone, the house felt even bigger than before. That was why she signed up for the high-intensity class at Prime Form Gym that Tuesday afternoon. Not because she needed it, God knows she was in better shape than most people her age, but because it made her feel alive. It made her feel seen. It made her feel like she belonged somewhere again. The moment the instructor walked in, the energy in the room shifted. He was tall, solid, with shoulders that looked carved and a voice smooth enough to make strangers stop mid-conversation. His name was Malik Carter, 34, confident, charming in a way that felt almost dangerous. When his eyes landed on Eleanor, he smiled like he already knew her story, like he saw straight through her carefully built walls. "You ready to show these young folks how it's done, Ms. Mayfield?" he asked, flashing a grin that made the women in the back row stand straighter. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Not since Richard. Not since she felt like a woman, not just a widow trying her best to stay busy. Eleanor laughed, brushing a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "I'll try to keep up." But Malik shook his head. "You're gonna lead." A simple line, a tiny compliment, but it cracked something open inside her, something she didn't realize had been locked away since the day she buried her husband. From that moment, she wasn't just working out. She was smiling more, staying longer after class, asking about upcoming sessions. And Malik, well, he always seemed to be right there beside her, spotting her during lifts, adjusting her posture, praising her form with a hand on her shoulder that lingered just a second too long. People noticed. The front desk receptionist whispered to another employee. A woman on the treadmill watched as Eleanor left the gym with cheeks flushed like a girl on her first date. But no one said anything. It looked sweet from the outside, innocent even. A handsome young trainer giving confidence to an older woman who still had plenty of life left in her. And maybe, just maybe, that's all Eleanor wanted. Not a new romance. Not a replacement for Richard. Just someone who made her feel alive in a house that had grown too quiet. Someone who looked at her as if she wasn't fading into the background of her own life. What she didn't know, what no one in the gym knew, was that Malik Carter wasn't just paying her attention. He was studying her, calculating her, choosing her. And this woman who looked 50 at 72, this woman who rebuilt her life from ashes, was about to step into the most dangerous chapter of her life, without even realizing she had already crossed the threshold. Malik Carter didn't need certifications, degrees, or a polished resume to succeed. He had something far more effective, the ability to look a woman in the eyes and make her feel like she was the only person in the room. At Prime Form Gym, that skill was worth more than any fitness license. Malik knew how to read people the way others read instruction manuals. One glance at posture, tone, or hesitation, and he could tell exactly what kind of attention they craved. But before he ever stepped foot in Palm Beach, before the fancy gym memberships and high-end clients, Malik came from a world that taught him one brutal lesson. You either take control or you get crushed. He grew up in the heart of Jacksonville's East Side, in a neighborhood where sirens were as common as birdsong and hope felt like a rumor. His mother, Trina, had once been a promising track star. But by the time Malik was old enough to tie his own shoes, she'd fallen hard into pills, bad men, and worse decisions. His childhood was a rotating door of instability. Boyfriends who stayed too long, nights where the electricity shut off, mornings where there was no breakfast except whatever he could sneak from the corner store. He learned early that no one was coming to save him. So he saved himself. At 9 years old, Malik began lifting weights using gallon jugs filled with sand. Not to become an athlete, not to impress anyone, but because muscles were armor. Strength meant fewer people tried to hurt you. And power, well, power meant people finally started handing you things instead of taking them away. But physical strength was only half of what he learned. The real transformation came when he was 15 in a humid summer that felt like it would never end. He was mowing lawns for a little cash when he met Ms. Levern, a retired schoolteacher living alone in a yellow house at the edge of the block. She paid him $40 for a 20-minute job and handed him a glass of cold lemonade like he'd walked on water. He came back the next week, then the next. Soon, she invited him inside, asked about his life, bought him a pair of new sneakers when his fell apart. She slipped him $100 bills for helping around the house, for cooking, for sitting on the porch and listening to stories about her late husband. Malik realized something then, something that would shape the rest of his life. People didn't always give because they had to. Sometimes they gave because they were desperate to feel appreciated, noticed, seen. By 17, he was living in Ms. Levern's spare bedroom. By 18, he disappeared from her life completely, taking her wedding ring, her TV, and every dollar from her dresser drawer. He didn't look back. That pattern followed him into adulthood. Gym jobs came and went. Women came and went faster. He never stayed long enough for the whispers to turn into reports or for suspicion to become evidence. But each time he moved on, he became more polished, more charming, more dangerous. When he arrived at Prime Form Gym in Palm Beach, he saw opportunity everywhere. Retired millionaires with too much time, too much money, and years of loneliness hidden behind Botox and tennis lessons. Women who looked at him the way someone dying of thirst looks at a glass of cold water. But Eleanor Mayfield, she was different. Not just wealthy, not just lonely. There was something soft about her, something elegant, something that made her vulnerability glow just beneath the surface. A widow who carried her grief like pearls around her neck. A woman who wanted connection more than she wanted youth. Malik targeted her immediately. He started with subtle compliments. You move better than half the trainers here. You don't look a day over 50. If I had a woman like you, I wouldn't let her out of my sight. He made her laugh. He pushed her harder in workouts, celebrating every rep like she'd just won a marathon. When he touched her arm to correct a posture, he let his hand linger just long enough for her to notice, but not long enough to alarm her. And Eleanor, starved of intimacy, starved of someone calling her beautiful, felt herself blooming under his attention. She started staying after class to chat. She brought him protein bars she thought he might like. She told him stories about her late husband, her garden, her granddaughter Olivia up in New York, who she missed dearly. Malik soaked it all in. Every detail was a lever he could pull later. Within weeks, he suggested private sessions at her home. More privacy, better lighting, a view of the ocean while training. Eleanor hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. Then she said yes. The first time he entered her house, Malik scanned every corner, every painting, every shelf. He didn't just see a home, he saw assets. He saw potential. He saw a woman who might willingly open her life, her heart, and her bank account for someone who made her feel less alone. Training sessions quickly evolved into emotional conversations, inside jokes, soft touches, flirty exchanges. Eleanor began dressing nicer for workouts, wearing perfume again, smiling wider. Neighbors noticed Malik's black Dodge Charger parked outside her home late at night. They whispered, but no one said a word. Because from the outside, it looked like a sweet story. A beautiful older woman rediscovering romance with a younger man who seemed to adore her. But Malik didn't adore her. He studied her. He calculated her. He chose her. And he wasn't finished. Not even close. Love, for Eleanor Mayfield, didn't arrive with fireworks or a sweeping cinematic score. It came quietly, like a warm breeze slipping through an open window, so gentle she didn't notice it until it had already filled the room. And Malik Carter knew exactly how to create that breeze. The shift from trainer to confidant happened so gradually that Eleanor couldn't pinpoint the moment it began. One day, he was correcting her posture during a shoulder press. The next, he was sitting in her kitchen drinking iced tea and asking questions that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. He listened, truly listened. Or at least, he made it look that way. When Eleanor talked about Richard, the late husband she'd loved more than life itself, Malik leaned forward, chin on his hand, eyes soft as if he were absorbing every detail. When she shared stories about her younger days, traveling through Europe, climbing mountains with girlfriends, dancing barefoot at beach bonfires, he chuckled, shook his head, and said, "You're something else, Ms. Mayfield. Most people your age don't have half your spirit. Most people your age." It was a line that should have sounded patronizing, but coming from Malik, it felt like praise. It felt like admiration. It felt special. Soon the private training sessions shifted into something more intimate. They'd take walks through her garden after workouts, brushing fingertips while looking at orchids she'd nursed for years. He'd bring her smoothies he made just for her and encourage her to rest her hand on his arm while they talked. The first time he hugged her, just a lingering embrace after a difficult workout, Eleanor's breath caught in her chest. She couldn't remember the last time someone held her with intention, with warmth, with closeness that didn't feel obligatory or pitying. She wasn't delusional. She knew she was in her 70s. She knew Malik was young enough to be her grandson. But loneliness, when stretched over too many years, starts to blur the edges of judgment. It softens the warnings. And when someone comes along offering attention, validation, and gentle affection, you don't question the source. You cling to the feeling. And Malik provided plenty of feelings. "Do you know what I like about you?" he whispered once, adjusting the band of her smartwatch. "You're real. Not plastic. Not fake. You've lived. You've loved. That's rare." No one had spoken to her like that since Richard died. Eleanor felt both guilty and exhilarated, like she was getting away with a secret she wasn't sure she deserved. The emotional intimacy turned into financial generosity faster than she realized. Malik told her about his dream, a small boutique gym where people like him, as he put it, kids who got dealt the wrong cards, could feel empowered. He talked about wanting to break the cycle, wanting to help others like himself avoid the mistakes he'd made. Eleanor believed him. Of course she did. So the day he told her he'd found a vacant retail space, but couldn't secure a loan because of bad luck and a bad bank manager, Eleanor didn't hesitate. She transferred $85,000 into his account with nothing more than a handwritten note tucked inside a birthday card. "I believe in you." Malik cried when he opened it. Real tears. Or at least they looked real. He hugged her, kissed her cheek, buried his face against her shoulder, and said, "No one's ever believed in me like this. Richard will be proud of you. I'm proud of you." That single sentence made Eleanor's knees weaken. She placed a trembling hand against Malik's cheek, not quite daring to cross the line into a real kiss. But she didn't need to. Malik had her exactly where he wanted her, emotionally tethered, financially vulnerable, and convinced she mattered again. Her friends noticed the glow on her face, the tighter workout clothes, the new haircut. Even Olivia, calling from New York during one of her late-night case prep breaks, said, "Grandma, you sound happy." "Who's the guy?" Eleanor laughed, too quickly. "No one, honey. Just a good trainer. A good friend." But Olivia pressed gently. "You sure he's not using you? You know how some men—" "Olivia." Eleanor cut in, her voice firmer than usual. "I'm not naive. I know what I'm doing." Except she didn't. Not really. She didn't know Malik had a history of bouncing from one wealthy older woman to the next, leaving behind rumors and empty checking accounts. She didn't know he had perfected the art of turning sympathy into currency. She didn't know his past lovers all followed the same pattern: love bombing, emotional dependence, financial gifts, and then abandonment. But most importantly, she didn't know the darkest secret of all, the medical diagnosis he had been hiding for years, the one that would soon unravel every lie he'd fed her. To Eleanor, Malik wasn't a predator. He was a lifeline, a reminder that she was still worthy of affection. A man who held her hand at sunset and whispered that age didn't matter. And for a lonely widow who had spent too many nights staring at the empty side of her bed, hope, even a fragile, borrowed, dangerous kind of hope, was enough to blind her to everything else. Eleanor had always been the kind of woman who brushed off aches and pains with a laugh. Getting old is a privilege, she used to tell her friends, echoing something Richard once said. But the morning she woke up drenched in sweat, sheets twisted around her body like she'd been fighting a ghost in her sleep, she felt something wasn't right. It wasn't just a bad night. It wasn't age. It was something deeper, something her instincts whispered about long before the doctors did. At first it was small things. A persistent cough, mouth sores that wouldn't heal, fatigue that clung to her bones, even on days when she barely pushed herself at the gym. Malik noticed it, but brushed it off with his usual charm. "Come on, Ms. Mayfield," he teased lightly. "You're tougher than half the people in that building. Probably just need more protein." She smiled, wanting desperately to believe him. But at night, she lay awake feeling her heart pound just a little too fast, her breath catch just a little too shallow, the heat rising under her skin like a fever that never fully broke. Dr. Laura Sanchez had been her physician for years, a woman Eleanor trusted like family. During her checkup, Dr. Sanchez frowned at the chart, then at Eleanor's pale lips, her sudden weight loss, her swollen lymph nodes. Something wasn't adding up. "What's been going on?" the doctor asked. Eleanor hesitated. She didn't want to talk about Malik, about the intimacy she hadn't expected but had welcomed anyway. It felt private, precious, complicated. So she just said, "I've been tired, and I've been fighting a cold." Dr. Sanchez didn't press, but she ran blood work, comprehensive blood work. Eleanor went home, distracted herself by watering her orchids, rearranging the framed photos of Richard in the hallway, and pretending everything was fine. 2 days later, her phone rang. "Eleanor," Dr. Sanchez said gently, "I need you to come in." She knew that tone. She'd heard it when Richard died. She'd heard it when her sister passed away. It was the tone a doctor uses when the truth is heavy enough to break someone. Eleanor drove to the clinic, palms sweating, heart thudding. Dr. Sanchez took her into a private consultation room, closed the door, and sat across from her. "Your results came back," she said quietly. "You tested positive for HIV." For a moment, Eleanor froze. The room dissolved. The air thinned. She waited for the doctor to say something else, to laugh, to correct herself, to tell her this was a mistake in the lab. But Dr. Sanchez just sat there, her eyes filled with concern. "That can't be right," Eleanor whispered. I don't understand." Dr. Sanchez explained the numbers, the markers, the viral load, words Eleanor barely heard. All she could think was how? How could this happen? She hadn't been with anyone since Richard. She lived carefully, quietly. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't naive. Except she had been. With one man who told her she made him feel seen. One man who said he'd never hurt her. One man she let into her home and her bed. Malik. That night, Eleanor sat in her dark kitchen, staring at her hands, replaying every moment with him. The way he sometimes avoided questions. The way he brushed off concerns. The way she caught him taking pills once, telling her they were vitamins for energy, before pocketing the container too quickly. A slow horror crept into her chest. She waited until Malik went to shower. Then she did something she'd never done in her life. She went through a man's things. She opened his gym bag first. Nothing. She rummaged through his jacket pockets. Receipts, gum wrappers, a crushed protein bar. Then she opened the inner zipper. And there it was. A small orange pill bottle with the label peeled off, but she recognized the medication name instantly. Antiretrovirals. HIV treatment medication. Her vision blurred. Her breath shook. She felt the room tilt beneath her feet. She set the bottle on the counter, hands trembling, and waited for him to come out of the shower. Malik, she said softly, holding up the pills. What is this? His eyes hardened instantly, like a door slamming shut. Why are you going through my things? He snapped. Because I'm sick. Eleanor cried. Because I tested positive. Because you lied to me. Malik stepped forward, grabbed the bottle, and hurled it into the trash. You don't know what you're talking about. You're confused. You're 72, Eleanor. Your immune system is weak. You probably got sick from something else. His words cut deeper than she expected. You're 72. As if her age made her delusional. As if her age made her disposable. That night, after he stormed out of the room, she opened her laptop with shaking hands and wrote a long, trembling email to her attorney. I believe Malik Carter knowingly exposed me to HIV. I am afraid. I am updating my will. Please call me in the morning. She printed a copy and hid it in the back of her bedroom drawer. It was the first step toward protecting herself, and the last warning Malik would ever tolerate. It was the kind of Florida Saturday that made you forget bad things could ever happen. The sky was a soft watercolor of blues. The ocean breeze drifted lazily through the palm trees and the Mayfield house. White stone, glass walls, perfectly trimmed hedges, looked like a postcard version of paradise. But inside, something cold had settled in Eleanor's chest all week. Ever since the diagnosis. Ever since the pills. Ever since the argument with Malik that left her shaken, embarrassed, and more alone than she'd felt even after Richard died. She hadn't seen him for 3 days. No calls. No texts. Only silence thick enough to suffocate. Eleanor made her decision Friday night. She deserved peace. She deserved safety. She deserved the right to live whatever time she had left without being afraid of the man sleeping under her roof. So she sent him a short message. I've packed your things. Please come pick them up tomorrow afternoon. No emotions. No explanations. Just a line drawn where her heart should have been. All Saturday morning, she rehearsed the moment in her head, imagining a controlled, civil goodbye. She'd hand him the bags, tell him it was over, tell him she needed to prioritize her health. Maybe he'd be hurt. Maybe he'd lash out verbally. But she never once imagined violence. Eleanor believed the part of him that pretended to care. She didn't realize she had become a threat to him the moment she wrote that email to her lawyer. By late afternoon, the Florida heat had softened into a warm, golden glow across the patio tiles. Eleanor took a deep breath, straightened the collar of her linen blouse, and opened the sliding glass door toward the pool deck. The water shimmered the way it always did at this hour, turquoise, gentle, inviting. It should have comforted her. Instead, it felt like a warning she didn't yet understand. At 6:43 p.m., the front camera caught the black Dodge Charger pulling into her driveway. Malik stepped out, broad-shouldered, expression unreadable, moving with the practiced confidence of someone who'd controlled every room he walked into. He didn't ring the bell. He didn't knock. He used the key she had stupidly given him months ago. The door opened, and the air shifted. Your things are out back, Eleanor said, voice steady but breath shallow. I don't want to argue. Malik didn't respond. He followed her through the house and onto the patio, eyes scanning the luggage neatly placed beside the outdoor sofa. Eleanor stayed a few feet back, creating space without making it obvious. When he finally spoke, the words were low. "So that's it? After everything I told you?" Eleanor swallowed hard. "I'm sick, Malik. I need to focus on my health. And you lied to me." He cut her off, stepping closer. "You're twisting my words. Trying to make me into some kind of monster." "I'm not twisting anything," she said, voice trembling despite her effort. "I know what those pills were. I know what you hid from me." He scoffed, shaking his head with a cold smile. "You don't know anything. You think you're smarter than you are." She flinched. He noticed, and something changed behind his eyes. Eleanor stepped back, clutching her elbow the way she did when she felt nervous. "Please just take your things and go." "Or what?" Malik said quietly. "You gonna tell someone?" Her heartbeat thudded painfully. He knew. Somehow, he knew she wasn't planning to keep his secret anymore. "I'm doing what's right," she whispered. Malik took a long breath, jaw tightening. Then, without another word, he walked past her and grabbed the first suitcase. For a brief moment, Eleanor allowed herself to hope he would simply leave. But as she turned to step away, toward the sliding door, towards safety, Malik's voice sliced through the air. "You think you can ruin my life and walk away?" Eleanor spun back toward him, frightened now. "Malik, please." The rest happened too fast for her to process. He moved with the speed of a trained athlete. 3 quick steps across the patio. Eleanor backed away instinctively, reaching toward the lounge chair for balance, but her sandals slipped slightly on the tile. "Malik, stop." He didn't stop. He planted his palm flat against her upper back and shoved. Hard. The world tilted. Blue sky, palm trees, the gleam of the pool's edge, all spinning, blending, disappearing. Eleanor felt her foot miss the tile, felt her body pitch forward, felt one instant of weightlessness before her forehead struck the concrete lip of the pool with a crack so sharp it echoed. Then she hit the water. Cold, silent. Everything slowed. Blood bloomed in faint red clouds around her face. Her eyes fluttered. She tried to swim upward, but her limbs wouldn't respond. The impact had stunned her, disoriented her. She could barely tell which way was the surface. And above the water, Malik stood perfectly still. He watched. He didn't jump in. He didn't call for help. He didn't move. The backyard camera captured every second. After a minute, one long, terrible minute, Malik finally turned away, walked into the house, and turned off the patio lights at 9:02 p.m. By the time a neighbor noticed the unusual darkness and the sound of water sloshing against the pool walls, it was too late. Emergency responders arrived to find Eleanor floating face down, her silver hair fanned out like a ghost's halo. The first officer wrote it up as an accident, a tragic fall, a 72-year-old woman losing her balance near the pool. They had no idea the truth was stored in the cloud backup of that camera. No idea that this wasn't an accident. No idea that the woman who loved, trusted, and forgave too easily had been murdered by the man she tried to let go. She never stood a chance. Jasmine arrived in Florida on a humid Sunday morning, the kind where the air clung to your skin like a warning. She hadn't slept on the flight. Her mind replayed the last conversation with her grandmother on a loop. "Come visit, honey. Soon." That tremor in Eleanor's voice wasn't just sadness. It was fear, the kind that creeps into a person's tone only when they already expect something bad to happen. When Jasmine pulled up to the house, she froze. The gardenias, Eleanor's pride and joy, were wilted. The mailbox was stuffed full, and despite the Florida heat, the house felt cold. Still, as if the walls themselves were holding a secret. Inside, everything was untouched. Shoes neatly lined by the door, her grandmother's reading glasses on the coffee table, a sweater draped across the arm of the couch, as if Eleanor had stepped away for a moment and would return any second. But she wouldn't, and Jasmine felt that reality punch her harder than she expected. After a few shaky breaths, she walked deeper into the house, trying to understand what had happened here. The funeral had been rushed, much too rushed. Closed casket, no autopsy, no proper chance to say goodbye. And the man Jasmine had never met, Malik, was suddenly everywhere, sitting in the front row like family, signing documents, driving her grandmother's Mercedes like it belonged to him. People whispered that he was helping with arrangements. Jasmine's gut told her he was helping himself. It only took minutes inside the house for that gut feeling to become certainty. She moved room to room, absorbing every detail the way she did when preparing a case. The kitchen counters showed no sign of meal prep. The patio door was smeared slightly, as if someone had grabbed it in a hurry. The pool outside shimmered under the late sun, impossibly peaceful for the place her grandmother had taken her last breath. In the guest bedroom, she noticed something strange, a duffel bag shoved partially under the bed. Inside were men's clothes, sneakers, a prepaid phone, and under a stack of folded shirts was a piece of paper, crumpled, smudged, but clear enough to read. I believe I am in danger. I believe Mr. Carter has intentionally infected me with HIV. I am removing him from my will effective immediately. Jasmine's hand shook as she held the note. She sat heavily on the edge of the bed, her breath leaving her body like someone had punched her lungs flat. Her grandmother had been afraid, explicitly afraid, and no one had listened. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," she whispered. "I should have been here sooner." But grief wasn't the only thing rising in her chest now. It was something hotter, sharper. Resolve. She marched into the study, booted up Eleanor's computer, and dug through emails, legal documents, browser history. Anything that could explain why a supposedly accidental drowning felt like a staged crime. She found the email Eleanor had sent to her lawyer, attached test results, financial documents, a request to remove Malik from her estate. She found drafts that were never sent, notes, scans, revisions. Her grandmother hadn't been confused. She hadn't been clumsy. She had been preparing for war, and she died before she could finish fighting. Jasmine printed everything she found, organized it in folders the way she did for trial, then drove straight to the Palm Beach Police Department. The officer at the front looked bored until she placed the documents on the counter. "This wasn't an accident," she said, voice steady. "My grandmother was murdered." Those words changed everything. Within an hour, Detective Angela Rowe, a sharp-eyed veteran with a reputation for spotting what others missed, sat across from Jasmine in a small interview room. Jasmine laid out everything. The will changes, the HIV diagnosis, the text message summoning Malik back to the house, the fear in Eleanor's voice, the rushed funeral. Angela listened silently, taking notes, occasionally humming under her breath, a habit Jasmine recognized from attorneys who were stitching a case together in their heads. When Jasmine finished, Angela closed the folder. "I need to check something," she said. "Did your grandmother have home security?" "Yes," Jasmine answered. "She upgraded everything last year." Angela stood. "Then there's a chance the truth is still in this house." The next hours moved like a movie Jasmine never wanted to star in. At the house, Angela found the security hub tucked behind a decorative vase. Within 24 hours, a warrant was issued for cloud backups. Jasmine slept in her grandmother's bed that night, clutching the robe that still smelled faintly of vanilla and lemon. She didn't dream. She didn't cry. She waited. When the call came the next morning, Angela's voice was clipped and tight. "We found something. You need to come in." In a dim video room at the station, Jasmine watched the footage. At first, it was silent patio scenes, Eleanor talking, fragile but determined. Malik approaching, body language sharp and coiled. Then the shove, the crack, the splash, the stillness. Jasmine didn't breathe through the entire clip. When it ended, her chest felt like it had been hollowed out. Angela turned to her gently. "Are you okay?" "No," Jasmine whispered, "but I will be once he's in handcuffs." Arresting Malik came 2 days later. Jasmine went to watch. She needed to. She needed to see him lose the power he had stolen. She stood across the street as police surrounded him at a gas station. For a moment, he looked confused, then irritated, then utterly expressionless. Jasmine didn't look away. Not when they cuffed him, not when he refused to answer questions, not when he stared around as if trying to place blame on anyone but himself. For the first time, she felt like her grandmother could finally rest. But Jasmine wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She would testify. She would stand in that courtroom. She would make sure no one dare call Eleanor's death an accident again. Because Eleanor didn't die from a fall. She died from trust, from loneliness, from letting the wrong man close enough to push her. And Jasmine would not let the world forget that. The courthouse in Palm Beach had seen its share of scandals, but nothing quite like the state of Florida versus Malik Carter. By the time jury selection began, the story had already set the internet on fire. 72-year-old widow dies in pool accident or murder. Reporters lined the sidewalk every morning. Satellite trucks parked along the street. True crime podcasts dissected every rumor. But inside the courtroom, amidst the polished wood railings and the hum of ceiling vents, the air felt different. It felt heavy. It felt personal. And every set of eyes kept drifting toward one person, the defendant. Malik Carter sat at the defense table, dressed in a tailored navy suit he could never have afforded before Eleanor. His hair was lined up perfectly, his gold watch replaced with a cheap plastic bracelet thanks to court protocol. He sat upright, chin slightly tilted, the same posture he used when he charmed gym clients or convinced older women he was harmless. But this wasn't the gym, and no amount of confidence could erase cold-blooded murder captured on camera. The prosecution didn't waste a second. This case, the lead prosecutor said, pacing slowly before the jury, is not about a tragic accident. It is about exploitation, deception, and murder. A vulnerable woman was targeted, used, infected with a life-threatening illness, and killed to protect the man who benefited from her death. Every juror's eyes lifted, and we will show you the truth. In her own words, on her own security footage. Then the defense stood, slick, overly rehearsed, trying too hard to look calm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with a sympathetic smile, "you will hear a lot of emotional theories today, but the evidence will prove that Mrs. Eleanor Mayfield slipped by the pool. It is tragic, yes, but not criminal. My client cared for her. He helped her, and now he is being blamed because people dislike their age difference." He used Eleanor's last name. Jasmine's jaw clenched. He didn't deserve to say it. The prosecution began with the science. Dr. Catherine Morales took the stand first. Elegant, professional, the kind of doctor who made jurors instinctively trust her. She explained Eleanor's HIV results, the progression, the viral load, the timeline. Is there any possibility she contracted the illness before meeting the defendant? The prosecutor asked. No, Dr. Morales said firmly. Her records show no partners since her husband's death. Her symptoms began only after she started her relationship with Mr. Carter. The defense objected. Overruled. When Dr. Morales described her visit to Eleanor's home, the fear in her patient's eyes, the courtroom became so quiet you could hear someone shifting in the back row. Next came the attorney who had handled Eleanor's estate. He presented two versions of her will, one naming Malik for a large inheritance, one revoking him entirely, written days before her death. And did Mrs. Mayfield express fear? The prosecutor asked. She said, "If anything happens to me, I want it on record." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Even Malik's lawyer looked rattled. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The lights dimmed. The big screen flickered. And Eleanor appeared, alive, walking across her patio. Jasmine inhaled sharply. She wasn't prepared to see her grandmother moving, talking, existing outside memory. The grief hit her like a physical blow. Then Malik entered the frame. Silent, cold, a shadow behind her. They watched the argument, Eleanor pointing, trembling, stepping away. The jurors leaned forward as if their bodies already sensed what was coming. And then the shove, the sickening crack, her body falling into the pool. A woman in the second row covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Two jurors flinched. Malik stared straight ahead, jaw tightening. The prosecutor replayed it. Once, twice, 3 times. "Does this look like an accident to you?" she asked the jury. No one spoke. They didn't have to. When the prosecution called Jasmine, the entire room shifted. Even Malik looked up. She walked to the stand wearing Eleanor's pearls, subtle, elegant, a silent promise that the woman who raised her was present in every heartbeat. She spoke clearly, but her voice carried the weight of love and loss. My grandmother was strong, careful. She never rushed, never slipped, not once in all the years she lived there. And the way she talked before she died, she was terrified. The defense attempted to poke holes. Miss Mayfield, are you suggesting your grandmother, a financially savvy, educated woman, was easily manipulated by a younger man? Jasmine didn't blink. She wasn't manipulated because she was weak. She was manipulated because she was kind. And he knew exactly how to use that. Her words landed like stones dropped in still water, slowly sinking, impossible to ignore. The jury wrote notes furiously. Malik's attorney tried everything. She tripped. She misunderstood the medication. She was confused. She changed her will because of family pressure. But every theory was crushed by the evidence. The medical timeline, the email declaring she feared for her life, the duffel bag with prepaid phones, the footage of him pushing her, his financial motive. By day 5, the defense strategy had become survival, not victory. The prosecutor's final words were quiet but devastating. Eleanor Mayfield gave this man love. She gave him trust. She gave him a home. And in return, he gave her death. This wasn't a slip, or a fall, or a tragic mistake. This was a man protecting the secret that he knowingly infected her with a deadly illness. This was murder. Malik's lawyer tried to fight back with charm, pity, and romantic delusions. But the jury wasn't listening anymore. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. 3 hours later, the jurors returned. The courtroom froze. The foreperson stood, hands trembling slightly. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. Murder, financial exploitation, fraud, knowingly transmitting HIV. Everything. Malik didn't gasp. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He simply stared forward, the mask finally cracking just enough to reveal the emptiness behind it. The judge's voice was firm and final. Life without the possibility of parole. And just like that, the predator lost his freedom forever. But justice, real justice, belonged to the woman who had died alone by her pool and the granddaughter who refused to let her story vanish. Eleanor Mayfield's story didn't end the day the judge read the verdict. It didn't end when Malik was let out in chains, or when the courtroom emptied, leaving behind only the echo of justice cracking through the silence he had relied on. No, the true ending came later. Quietly, slowly, in the lives she touched, and in the life that refused to let hers disappear. Because Eleanor wasn't just a victim. She wasn't just a headline or cautionary tale. She was a woman who danced barefoot in her kitchen, who loved gardenias, who wore linen blouses even when she wasn't leaving the house. A woman who aged with grace, who fought loneliness with stubborn optimism, who believed, despite every bruise life had given her, that love was still possible at 72. And her legacy grew long after her death, carried by the one person who saw the truth when no one else did, her granddaughter. After the trial, Jasmine stayed in Florida longer than she intended. 3 weeks turned into 4. Some days she walked through the house simply because she needed to feel her grandmother's presence in the quiet spaces, on the patio where she read her newspapers, in the kitchen where she kept lemon slices ready in a small glass bowl, in the study where she wrote letters to Richard long after he was gone. Every object felt like a conversation paused mid-sentence. Her robe still draped over the bedroom chair. A pair of reading glasses tucked into a book she never finished. A half-written grocery list on the fridge. Tea, lemons, jasmine rice. Jasmine would touch the list with trembling fingers and whisper, "I'm still here, Grandma. I'm still listening." There was grief in that house, yes. But there was also love, a stubborn, enduring love that Malik had failed to extinguish. One afternoon, Jasmine found a leather-bound journal tied with a worn blue ribbon. Inside were decades of entries, stories of Eleanor falling in love with Richard, stories of her moving to Florida, reflections on aging, on losing friends, on surviving widowhood. And then, near the end, came the pages about Malik. Soft entries at first, hopeful, nervous, hesitant. Then confusion, then fear, then heartbreak. One line broke Jasmine open more than any other. "Love at my age doesn't roar. It whispers, but maybe I've mistaken a lie for a lullaby." She read it over and over until the ink blurred with her tears. That was the moment she realized her grandmother had never been foolish, only human. Human enough to want to feel desired. Human enough to overlook warning signs. Human enough to choose hope, even when it cost her everything. Eleanor didn't die because she was weak. She died because she was still capable of believing in love. And Jasmine refused to let that be twisted into shame. When Jasmine returned to New York, she didn't walk back into the courtroom like before. She couldn't, not yet. Something inside her had shifted, something deep and relentless. She used the inheritance Eleanor left her, not the large sums, but the liquid assets her grandmother had set aside for something meaningful, and found it. The Mayfield Trust for senior safety and financial protection. Its purpose was simple but powerful. Educate elderly communities about romantic exploitation. Provide free legal resources. Advocate for mandatory reporting laws in gyms, retirement communities, and private caregiving industries. Offer counseling and support for families affected by elder abuse. Jasmine spoke at community centers, libraries, senior clubs, churches, anywhere with a microphone and a willing audience. Her keynote talk became famous online. Lonely is not stupid, and love shouldn't kill you. She spoke with fire, with heartbreak, with the kind of quiet fury that only comes from losing someone you loved deeply. And everywhere she went, people cried. People hugged her. People told stories about their own mothers, grandmothers, neighbors, women who were targeted, manipulated, drained emotionally or financially by men who saw vulnerability as opportunity. Jasmine didn't just seek justice anymore. She became justice. She lived it. She breathed it. And in every room she entered, Eleanor's spirit followed. Every year on July 8th, the day Eleanor died, Jasmine flew back to Palm Beach. She didn't go into the house. Some wounds she chose to honor without reopening. Instead, she sat by the garden gate with a thermos of lukewarm tea, a bouquet of white lilies, and a leather journal tied with a blue ribbon. She would sit in the Florida heat for an hour or two, legs crossed, eyes closed, listening to the rustle of palm leaves and the far-off hum of the shoreline. Sometimes she spoke out loud, updating her grandmother about the trust, or her cases, or the man she was beginning to date but wasn't sure about yet. Sometimes she didn't speak at all, but she always ended the visit with the same whisper. You deserve more. Because Eleanor did. She deserved a love that didn't break her. A companion who saw her, truly saw her, not as a wallet, or a way out, or a secret to be silenced, but as a woman with depth and desires and a life worth protecting. In time, the trust expanded. Jasmine hired attorneys, advocates, investigators. They fought dozens of cases, rescued hundreds of seniors from predatory relationships, saved millions in stolen assets. A national talk show invited Jasmine to speak, then a documentary, then a Senate committee. One senator told her, "Your grandmother didn't die for nothing." Jasmine didn't smile. She simply said, "She didn't die for anything, but I can make sure her story saves someone else." Her work eventually influenced the passing of the Elder Relationship Exploitation Prevention Act, providing new protections for vulnerable seniors nationwide. Newspapers called it the Mayfield Law. Jasmine kept a copy of the bill framed on her office wall. But she always said the real legacy wasn't the law, or the foundation, or the headlines. The real legacy was a woman who refused to fade quietly into old age. A woman who dared to love again. A woman who wanted to be seen. And finally, through her granddaughter's devotion, she was. Some stories end with tragedy, but Eleanor's didn't. Her death sparked a movement. Her journal healed strangers. Her granddaughter became a force of unstoppable truth. And her name, once whispered in grief, was now spoken in classrooms, legal seminars, and advocacy groups across the country. In the end, Eleanor got what she always wanted: to matter, to be remembered, to be seen. And as long as Jasmine lived, her grandmother's voice would never be silenced again.